Welcome back to LC Coins World, where every coin tells a story, and every story brings the past to life. Today, we take a deep journey into one of the most iconic and commonly overlooked pieces of American currency, the 1980 Washington $quarter coin, minted in the United States during a time of cultural change, economic challenges, and the evolving legacy of American coinage. This coin may seem ordinary to some, but in reality, it carries with it decades of historical weight, minting significance, and numismatic intrigue. The 1980 quarter was produced at the Denver Mint as identified by the D Mint mark, proudly placed beneath the date on the coin's obverse. It features the enduring portrait of George Washington, designed by John Flanagan, a design first introduced in 1932 to honor the 200th anniversary of the birth of the first President of the United States. Over the years, the Washington quarter became not just a medium of exchange, but a symbol of national identity, its consistent presence in pockets, purses, and tills from coast to coast serving as a reminder of American values, leadership, and heritage. By 1980, America had fully transitioned from silver coinage into base metals, and this quarter was composed primarily of copper and nickel, reflecting the economic realities of the post-silver age. Yet even with its clad composition, the coin remained a cornerstone of daily transactions, its image familiar and trusted in the hands of millions. The Denver Mint played a critical role that year in ensuring the coin supply met the demands of a growing and diversifying economy, pumping out hundreds of millions of these quarters, each with slight variances, minting characteristics, and even occasional errors that today spark the interest of collectors across the nation. What makes the 1980 quarter truly fascinating is not only its place in monetary circulation, but its subtle variations that can dramatically increase its value among collectors. Die varieties, striking errors, double dies, off-center strikes, and high-grade mint state examples all contribute to the market demand and appraisal of this coin, and in this video, we will break down each of those elements with clarity, research, and real examples so you can fully appreciate what makes this quarter more than just change. The coin's historical background is equally compelling, coming off the tail end of the economically uncertain 1970s and entering a new decade of Reagan-era policies, deregulation, inflation concerns, and shifts in manufacturing. The quarter remained a stable and unchanging face amid all that flux. This was a time when America was preparing for innovation, while holding tightly to symbols of consistency and tradition, and nothing represented that better in pocket form than the quarter. As we explore this coin's origins, its role in commerce, its unique minting journey, and the reasons it continues to attract numismatic attention, today we will uncover the lesser-known details and stories that turn a simple 25-cent piece into a collectible of significance. Whether you're a seasoned collector, a beginner enthusiast, or someone who just found an old coin in a drawer and wondered what it might be worth, this episode is for you. We will also examine auction results, population reports, collector trends, and professional grading insights to give you a full perspective on how this coin is evaluated in the modern coin collecting world. You'll learn how to recognize valuable specimens, what to avoid, and how to potentially find a 1980 Washington quarter worth far more than its face value. So stay with us as we turn back the clock to 1980. Open the vaults of minting history and tell the full story of the Washington $quarter like never before. Welcome again to LC Coins World, your home for rare coins, real stories, and the history hidden in your pocket change. Welcome back to LC Coins World, where every coin tells a story, and today, we take a deep dive into one of the most iconic and familiar coins in American pockets and drawers across generations, the 1980 Lincoln penny. More than just a 1-cent piece, this coin holds a place in the heart of millions of Americans, and its journey through American history is richer than many collectors realize. The 1980 Lincoln penny was minted during a time of great change in the United States, a time when inflation was high, industries were shifting, and American families were navigating a new economic reality. As we turn back the clock to 1980, we find a country coming out of the turbulent 70s struggling with rising oil prices, unemployment, and the aftershocks of the Vietnam War. Yet even during these challenging times, the United States Mint continued its commitment to producing coins that not only serve economic purposes but also preserve national heritage. The 1980 Lincoln cent continued the long legacy started in 1909, when President Theodore Roosevelt sought to beautify American coinage and chose Abraham Lincoln to be the first real person featured on a regular circulating coin in US history. Designed by Victor David Brenner, the obverse of the Lincoln penny remained largely unchanged for decades, with the right-facing portrait of President Lincoln a symbol of unity, resilience, and American ideals. The reverse of the 1980 penny still featured the Lincoln Memorial, a design introduced in 1959 to mark the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth and to honor his role in preserving the Union. The design, by Frank Gasparo, remained a cornerstone of the series until 2008, making this coin a part of a long and honored chapter in US mint history. The 1980 Lincoln penny was struck in both Philadelphia and Denver. The Philadelphia version has no mint mark, while the Denver minted coins carry a small D beneath the date. Both coins were struck primarily in a composition of 95% copper and 5% zinc, with a total weight of 3.11 grams, making it one of the last years before the major composition shift that would take place in 1982, when the US Mint transitioned to a predominantly zinc core with copper plating due to the rising cost of copper. This makes the 1980 penny particularly interesting to collectors and historians because it represents the end of an era in American coin metallurgy. The mintage numbers for the 1980 Lincoln penny were massive, with billions produced at both mints. The Philadelphia Mint struck over 7.4 billion coins, and the Denver Mint produced more than 5.1 billion, making it one of the highest mintage years in the Lincoln cent series. Despite these large numbers, collectors continue to seek out pristine examples in high mint state conditions, especially those graded Ms. 66 or higher by PCGs or NGC coins with full red luster, sharp strike, and minimal contact marks can fetch strong premiums in the collector market. Errors and varieties also contribute to the value and intrigue of the 1980 Lincoln penny. Among the most desirable are off-center strikes, double die obverses, or reverses, and coins struck on foreign planchets or transitional metal blanks. Collectors should always be on the lookout for strong doubling on the date, Liberty, or In God We Trust, which could indicate a valuable error piece. Likewise, coins with major off-center strikes or missing elements are considered rare and collectible, especially if they also remain in uncirculated condition. Another area of interest is the role that the 1980 Lincoln penny played in the everyday lives of Americans at the time, from lunch counters to payphones, vending machines to cash registers. The penny was still an essential part of daily transactions. It was a time when a dollar stretched further and pocket change mattered. The Lincoln penny often carried emotional weight as well. It was the coin parents gave their kids to start their savings jars, the coin that rolled across countless counters, and the coin that sometimes found itself tossed into fountains with wishes whispered quietly behind it. For the numismatic community, the 1980 Lincoln penny remains a staple of early modern coin collect, easy to find but hard to master, with the perfect combination of historical importance, design continuity, and subtle variations that can excite even veteran collectors. As we explore the striking process, the role of the mint engravers, the circulation history, and market trends surrounding the 1980 penny, we discover that this humble coin tells a bigger story about America, its economy, its identity, and its people. So whether you are a seasoned coin collector or someone who just found an old penny in your drawer and got curious, this video is for you. Stay with us as we explore die characteristics, minting anomalies, collector insights and expert appraisals of the 1980 Lincoln penny. We will hear from specialists, look at grading examples, and even explore auction results to understand how 1 cent can sometimes be worth far more than its face value in historical and collector terms. The 1980 Lincoln penny is more than money, is memory. It is meaning, it is America in copper formal, where every coin tells a story. And today, that story is about a coin you might have once carried in your pocket or dropped into a vending machine without a second thought. But this quarter is no ordinary change. This is the 1982 Washington quarter dollar, and it holds a place in American coinage history that most people overlook. Let's step back to the year 1982, a time of change for the United States. Economy inflation had shaken the country in the late 70s, and early 80s were no easier. The nation was entering a recession, unemployment was rising, and costs were being cut everywhere, including at the United States Mint. And this brings us to one of the most fascinating facts about the 1982 quarter. It was the first year since 1964 that the US Mint chose not to produce uncirculated coin sets. This decision was driven by budget cuts and financial constraints, and for collectors, it would prove to be a turning point. The 1982 quarter was minted at 3 different locations: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. The Philadelphia Mint, which gave us the 1982 P quarter, had only recently begun using the P Mint mark just 2 years earlier in 1980. So this coin was part of the early group of coins to proudly carry the P, indicating its place of birth. Now, when it comes to metal content, the 1982 quarter, like all post-1965 quarters, was made from a clad composition of copper and nickel over a copper core. Gone were the days of silver quarters, and the 1982 coin was built for durability and high mintage to meet the demands of the economy. But the absence of mint sets combined with high circulation meant that very few of these coins survived in truly high grades. One of the most sought-after traits of the 1982 P Washington quarter is its condition. Most circulated examples have wear and tear, but uncirculated or high mint state coins are incredibly rare, and when found, can fetch serious money, especially if they have strong luster, full details, and no major contact marks. And because the mint didn't produce official uncirculated sets in 1982, collectors had to rely on finding pristine coins from circulation or through bank rolls. Another fascinating detail lies in the varieties and errors of the 1982 P quarter. One of the most famous is the no mint mark weak strike, where the P is barely visible or missing entirely, although not officially considered an error by the mint. Some of these weak strike coins have created buzz in the coin community. Collectors debate the minting process, the die pressure, the wear on dies, and the speed of production that could have led to missing or faint mint marks. Then there are strike doubling and die deterioration errors seen on some 1982 quarters. These types of errors often appear on the word Liberty, the date, or the mint mark. And while some are minor, others are dramatic enough to bring premium prices on the secondary market. To understand the 1982 P Washington quarter is to understand a moment in U.S. mint history when cost-cutting collided with mass production, and a subtle storm of rarity was born. Most collectors at the time didn't know this coin would become difficult to find in mint state condition decades later, which is why those who held on to bankrolls or saved new-looking quarters from change are now sitting on numismatic gold. The obverse of the coin still features the classic image of George Washington, designed by John Flanagan, a design originally introduced in 1932 for the bicentennial of Washington's birth, and the reverse features the bold eagle with outstretched wings clutching arrows and olive branches, symbolizing America's balance of readiness and peace. The design stayed unchanged through decades until the state quarters arrived in 1999. Collectors often wonder what makes the 1982 P quarter so different from other clad coins, and the answer lies in the fact that this coin bridges the gap between mass production, and collectible scarcity is the result of everyday coinage meeting unexpected rarity, a circulating coin that became a challenge to collect in top quality, and, as years pass by, the number of untouched examples only continues to shrink, making this an exciting piece for both new collectors and veteran numismatists. In recent years, high-grade 1982p quarters certified by PCGs or NGC have commanded hundreds of dollars at auction. Ms. 66 and Ms. 67 examples are especially prized by registry set collectors who aim to build complete and high-ranking sets, and for those looking for investment coins. The 1982p quarter has quietly become one of the hidden gems in modern clad coinage. Now, let's talk population numbers and census reports. Grading services have noted that while millions of 1982 quarters were struck, only a tiny fraction have been submitted and certified in high grades. This creates a supply and demand issue and fuels the coin's long-term value trajectory. In fact, for coins that were once worth just 25 cents, seeing them fetch triple digits in auctions is proof of how the numismatic world can reward knowledge and patience. Many collectors enjoy the hunt for the 1982p Washington quarter because it represents more than just a coin. It's a piece of American history minted in a transitional time. It is also part of a small club of modern quarters with real scarcity in high grades, and it teaches us that even modern change can become tomorrow's treasure. So if you have a 1982p quarter in your collection, or maybe tucked away in a drawer, take a closer look. Check the surfaces, the fields, the luster, and the mint mark, and consider whether you might be holding something much more valuable than a piece of old change. This is not just metal, it's a memory, a marker in American coinage, a piece of everyday life turned collectible. Stay with us as we now explore grading tips, auction values, and real examples from coin shows that have brought the 1982p quarter, where every coin tells a story. And today, we dive into the legacy, the production, and the enduring impact of the 1974 Lincoln penny coin that at first glance may appear simple and common, but when examined closely reveals a deep history, reflection of economic experimentation, and the shifting tides of American minting policy. The 1974 Lincoln cent is more than just a piece of copper. It represents a pivotal moment in American numismatics, and for collectors and historians alike, this coin serves as a marker of both tradition and transformation. Let's begin with the background. The Lincoln cent was first introduced in 1909 to commemorate the 100th birthday of President Abraham Lincoln. It was the first regularly circulating US coin to feature a real person on its obverse, and it was designed by Victor David Brenner, whose initials VD can be seen on the reverse of some of the early issues. Since 1909, the Lincoln penny has remained one of the most iconic and enduring coins in United States history, both in circulation and in the hearts of collectors. But by the early 1970s, the cost of producing copper cents was becoming a significant concern for the US Mint. Now, to understand the 1974 Lincoln penny, we must look at what was happening during that period. In the early 1970s, inflation was on the rise, commodity prices were fluctuating, and copper prices in particular were increasing steadily. By 1973, the cost of producing a 1-cent coin was approaching, and in some cases exceeding, the face value of the coin. This was an economic red flag for the US Treasury and the Mint. Officials had to make a difficult decision. Should they continue using copper or look for alternative materials? The year 1974 became the focal point of this debate and action. In 1974, the US Mint began experimenting with different compositions for the penny. The goal was to reduce costs while maintaining the same size, weight, and general appearance of the coin. After extensive research and development, the Mint struck a number of test coins, using aluminum rather than the traditional 95% copper and 5% zinc alloy. The aluminum pennies of 1974 became one of the most intriguing and controversial experiments in US coinage history. Although nearly 1.5 million aluminum cents were struck, none were released into circulation as pushback from various interest groups, including pediatricians and vending machine companies, caused the mint to reconsider. Pediatricians were concerned that, if aluminum cents were swallowed, they would not show up clearly on X-rays, making it difficult to detect or remove if a child swallowed one. Meanwhile, vending machine manufacturers worried that their machines would not be able to properly recognize or reject the new composition, causing malfunctions and business losses. As a result of this opposition, the mint ordered the aluminum cents to be destroyed, and only a few are known to survive today, held secretly and controversially in private collections or at the Smithsonian. The standard 1974 Lincoln cents that entered circulation were struck using the same bronze alloy that had been used for decades. This alloy was composed of 95% copper and 5% zinc and tin. These coins were produced at all three major mints of the time: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, and each mint produced a substantial number of coins. The Philadelphia Mint produced over 4 billion coins without a mint mark. The Denver Mint produced over 4 billion coins with the D mint mark, and the San Francisco Mint produced nearly 412 million coins, most of which were intended for collector-proof sets. From a design perspective, the 1974 Lincoln cent remained consistent with previous issues, featuring the familiar right-facing profile of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse with the inscription, "In God We Trust," above liberty to the left and the date to the right. Beneath the date, the D or S mint mark would be found if the coin was struck in Denver or San Francisco, respectively. The reverse featured the Lincoln Memorial, a design first introduced in 1959 to commemorate the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. This design, by Frank Gasparo, would remain in use until 2008. Now, let's discuss the collectability of the 1974 Lincoln penny. While billions of these coins were produced, making most of them relatively common, there are still factors that make certain examples more desirable to collectors. The most important of these factors include mint state condition, errors and varieties, and any historical significance tied to experimental pieces. For instance, any 1974 aluminum cent, even though officially never released into circulation, is considered incredibly rare, and if one ever surfaces in public, it becomes the focus of intense legal and numismatic debate, as the US Mint considers them government property. Some 1974 cents have been found with doubling in the lettering or the date, particularly from the Denver Mint. While these are relatively rare, any 1974 double die variety tends to command a strong premium among collectors, especially if the coin is in mint state or higher condition. For collectors focusing on condition, full red and circulated coins, especially those graded Ms. 65 or higher by third-party grading companies like PCGs or NGC, are highly desirable, as coins toned red retain their original luster and show little to no signs of oxidation or circulation, and these visually appealing coins often sell for much higher than face value, even among common date coins. Proof versions of the 1974 cent were struck at the San Francisco Mint and intended for collectors. Proof coins are made using specially polished dies and planchets and display a mirror-like background with frosted devices. These proof coins are collected for their beauty and craftsmanship, and those in pristine condition, especially PR70 examples, can be quite valuable within collector circles. The economic significance of the 1974 cent is also worth mentioning, as this was the last year before the mint moved fully away from the traditional bronze alloy. Starting in mid-1982, the US Mint transitioned to a primarily zinc-based composition with only a thin copper plating. The shift was driven by the same economic pressures that had prompted the aluminum experiment in the 70s, but by 1982 the technology and economic environment had changed enough to allow the mint to move forward with a new composition. So while the 1974 Lincoln penny may not look much different from the pennies that came before or after, it stands at a crossroads in its coinage history. It is the coin of a moment when America stood on the edge of change, when inflation, uncertainty, and industrial feedback shaped the physical currency in our hands. In closing, the 1974 Lincoln penny remains a cornerstone in the history of American coinage for its role in one of the most ambitious compositional experiments ever attempted by the US Mint, for the sheer volume of coins produced and circulated, for the collectors who appreciate every detail from mint mark to metal content, and for the everyday Americans who unknowingly carried a piece of that economic story in their pocket. This coin continues to live on, not just in jars, drawers, and collections, but in the broader narrative of how a nation manages its economy, its traditions, and its sense of value. Stay tuned here on LC Coins as we continue to explore the stories behind the coins, the histories they hold, and the people who collect them, because behind every coin there is a story, and we are here to tell it. Where every coin tells a story and every detail unlocks a forgotten chapter of our shared history. Today, we take a deep and focused journey into the remarkable legacy of the 1965 Roosevelt Dime, a coin that emerged not just from the presses of the United States Mint, but from the crossroads of an era that reshaped modern American currency forever. To understand the full historical significance of the 1965 Roosevelt Dime, we must first travel back to the early post-World War II period, when America was rebuilding its global position, emerging as a superpower, and undergoing unprecedented economic and cultural changes. The Roosevelt Dime was introduced in 1946 to honor the memory of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who had led the nation through the Great Depression and most of World War II. His image replaced the winged Liberty head dime known as the Mercury dime, which had circulated since 1916. But something extraordinary happened in 1965. And it was not just about design or symbolism. It was about composition policy, trust, and a complete transformation in the way Americans viewed their coinage. Up until 1964, the dime, along with quarters and half dollars, were made of 90% silver, a standard that had been in place for decades. However, as the price of silver rose and hoarding increased, the federal government faced a monetary crisis that could no longer be ignored. In response to this crisis, Congress passed the Coinage Act of 1965, a law that marked the end of circulating silver coinage in the United States. Starting that year, all dimes, quarters, and eventually half dollars would be minted using a copper core clad in an alloy of copper and nickel. What followed was a sea change in American numismatics, and at the center of that transition stood the 1965 Roosevelt Dime. This coin was more than just pocket change. It was the first of its kind, the physical manifestation of a new monetary strategy and economic necessity. Its composition was now clad not silver, its weight and appearance slightly altered, its value in metal reduced, and its historical place forever marked by the turning tides of fiscal reform. Collectors, investors, and everyday Americans quickly took notice. Many began to save the last silver dimes of 1964. Let's examine the new dimes of 1965 to see how they differed, or if any rare transition errors occurred. And indeed, there are known examples of 1965 dimes accidentally struck on silver planchets intended for the previous year. These mint errors have become highly prized and valuable finds. But beyond the errors and metal content lies the story of a coin that had to carry on tradition while serving a new purpose. The Roosevelt Dime retained its familiar obverse design, featuring the dignified profile of President Roosevelt facing left, sculpted by John Arsenic. The reverse remained the same as well, with the olive branch torch, an oak branch symbolizing peace, liberty, and strength respectively. This continuity in design helped reassure the public during a time of change and maintain the visual identity of the American dime, even as its substance shifted beneath the surface. The 1965 Roosevelt Dime was minted in enormous quantities, over 1.6 billion examples were struck at the Philadelphia Mint alone, and for the first time in modern American minting, no mint mark was placed on coins produced in Philadelphia. This decision made identifying certain minting errors more challenging, but also created a uniform appearance for the new clad coinage, which was crucial for acceptance among the public. This episode in coinage history also coincided with broader cultural and economic shifts across America. The mid-60s were a period of civil rights movements, space exploration, the Vietnam War, and the early waves of inflation, all of which shaped public attitudes toward the economy and the value of money. The change in coinage was not just a technical event, it was a mirror reflecting the changing face of the nation. Throughout this video, we will explore how the 1965 Roosevelt Dime impacted collectors, why some of these dimes are now worth significantly more than face value, and what varieties, errors, and historical insights lie hidden beneath the surface of this seemingly common coin. We will examine auction records, professional grading scales, mintage data, and collector trends to uncover how this modest 10-cent piece fits into the greater narrative of American monetary history and what lessons it still holds for us today. So grab your coin folders, magnifiers, and curiosity as we take a deep dive into one of the most transitional pieces in U.S. coinage history, the 1965 Roosevelt Dime, here on LC Coins World, where history, value, and discovery come together in every episode.